Welcome to students for our English class, which today the lesson we will take on will be a truly beautiful mind. That is the fourth lesson that we will do today. The story is of Einstein, the great scientist mathematician that you are studying all the time in your science, Einstein's theories and all that. So we'll see about this lesson. Beautiful mind. It's mind that is beautiful, not Einstein. The mind is beautiful, unique mind that rarely we have seen that was due or was seen by up till now. Very rare type of scientist he was, and he created history in science wherein his contribution has been immense. So who do you think of when you hear the word genius? Who is a genius? What qualities do you think a genius has? We should now read about the young German civil servant who took the world by storm 100 years ago in the summer of 1905. In the summer, of 1905. So this is the time where 100 years back you see that he was the person who created history. 26-year-old published a quick succession four groundbreaking papers about light, the motion of particles, the electrodynamics of moving bodies, and energy. Its work took up only a few pages in scientific journals, but changed forever our understanding of space, time, and entire cosmos. He wrote thesis, not big volumes of books, but yet his findings and his whatever theories based on the concepts of movement of bodies or energy and related to our electrodynamics, or that is study. They were groundbreaking papers. Groundbreaking means it was historic in the sense it never had this type of discoveries of science and mathematics was done ever in the person who any person in the earth, and that was something unique about him. Einstein, we can say them, transfer the name Einstein to synonym for genius. He is Einstein, that is a genius person. No? Synonymous means, synonyms, that one word is the similar meaning. So if you say genius and Einstein, that type of analogy is now established, and therefore we can say that Einstein was really a great man ever produced. Okay, so 50 years after his death, Albert Einstein genius still reigns his rule. Students study, even scientists study, even talks and discussion about this genius work is done even after his 50 years are over. So genius people are those who will keep the mark on humanity, where we see that this discoveries or inventions that can make have an effect on us for a longer period of time. Albert Einstein was born on 14th March 1879 in the German city of Ulm without any indication that he was destined for greatness. From when he was a young boy, never it was seen any extraordinary qualities in him that we can say that he would be such a great man when he grew up. On the contrary, his mother, Albert, was a freak. Freak means not a genuine person. To her, her head seemed much too large. So her head was large in that way. It is said about his physical outlook. At the age of 2.5, Einstein still wasn't talking. They finally did learn to speak. He uttered everything twice. So he had problem in his understanding and talking. So, he talked also 2.5 years after at the age he talks, or speaks. So that's also very typical of a child. Einstein did not know what to do when with other children, and his playmates called him rather boring. He didn't know how to play with his friends. So the youngsters played by himself. The youngsters played by. So this, he played by himself. He didn't mingle with other boys and children, like you do in school. He was not able to do that. Much of the time, he especially loved mechanical toys, looking for his newborn sister Maja. He is said to have said, "Fine, but where are her wheels?" So mechanical, everything, movement, how it moves, how it takes that motion, or like that, that way his mind was. And therefore, even while playing with his younger sister, she would when she used to move at that time. Einstein used to ask how how come that she has not got wheels, how she is moving without that. The headmaster once told his father what Einstein choose as a profession wouldn't matter, because he'll never make a success at anything. His thinking is different, not a normal student is. His thinking is like that, wherein he would, whatever he'll do, he'll not be successful in that particular field he adopts. Einstein began learning to play the violin at the age of 6 because his mother wanted him to. He later became a gifted amateur violinist, maintaining this skill throughout his life. Violinist player, he was a good violin player, and therefore he's called amateur violinist. Amateur means those people, who are not professionals, who don't do any work for money, and therefore Einstein didn't take a violin player playing as a profession, and therefore he can be said that he is a mature violinist. But Albert Einstein was not a bad pupil. He went to high school in Munich, where Einstein's family had moved. He was 15 months old and scored good marks in almost every subject. So when he went to school, he was, very intelligent, and therefore could score good marks in every subject. Einstein hated the school's regimentation. Regimentation means, discipline taken to an extreme stage of discipline. This should be done this way only. No, your personal intervention in that. So that type of thing is there. That's called regimentation. Einstein didn't like that. He wanted his own thinking to, work. And after a clash with his teachers, at the age of 15, Einstein felt stifled that he left the school for good. He used to argue with the teachers on various topics, and therefore he had to leave schools. So stifled he felt. Stifled means, someone is unable to breathe, or suffocation he felt. What is this? Mugging up or learning and all that. He wanted to have his intuition and work out things for himself, not what the teachers said. Previous year, Albert's parents had moved to Milan and left their son with relatives. After prolonged discussion, Einstein got to wish to continue his education in German-speaking Switzerland, in a city which was more liberal than Munich. But that way, he decides he will study in Germany. Einstein was highly gifted in mathematics and interested in physics. Mathematics and particularly in physics. And after finishing school, he decided to study at a university in Zurich. But science wasn't the only thing that appealed to the dashing young man with the walrus mustaches. Walrus, its mustaches were such that it covered his lips, upper lip, and even some part of the lower lip. And therefore, that type of mustaches are called walrus mustaches. He also felt a special interest in the fellow students, Mileva Marek, whom he found to be a clever creature. This young Serb from Serbia, like we have Indian, because Serbia is a country, and from that, belonging from that origin, that people are known as Serbs. I went to this Serb Mileva Marek was, he came to Switzerland because the University in Zurich was one of the few in Europe where women could get a degree. Women, as you know, liberation of women and women's rights and all that came very late, you can see. And that is why even women in a higher degree were not, allotted in big universities. And therefore, we see that here Zurich was one of the rare type of education institution. Einstein saw in her an ally among the Philistines. Philistines used disapproving and talk about people who are not like art, literature, or music. So here those people in his family and at that university with whom he was constantly at odds. When in university he was at odds, the couple fell in love. Let us survive, which they put their affection into words, mixing science with tenderness. Both were of science, Mileva and Marek and Einstein were of science field, and the letters they wrote also mixed science in them, chemistry, right? Wrote Einstein many happy and proud, relatively to victorious conclusion. See, words like relativity and conclusion in an experiment, such science words, so that words are used in the love letters which are exchanged between Mileva and Einstein. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert Einstein was university graduate and unemployed. So he couldn't get an proper or appropriate job which he wanted, and he was unemployed. He worked as a teaching assistant, gave private lessons, and finally secured a job in 1902 as a technical expert to assessing other people's inventions. Whatever other people have invented, he has to assess whether it's a genuine or fake, or what type of trick is used by this for this particular invention being submitted. So that was assessed by Einstein. That work he did. Einstein was actually developing his own ideas in secret. He said to have jokingly called his desk drawer as the work as the Bureau of Theoretical Physics. So the desk drawer which is there, he used to scribble this physics and other mathematical things on that paper and put it in the desk at that time, whenever he got free time or maybe in the office, and therefore he called it bureau. Bureau means a particular institution or a school of thought that is keeping track of a particular subject, and here physics related whatever things which were there theoretical were put in his desk drawer. One of the famous papers of 1905 was Einstein's spatial theory of relativity, according to which time and distance were not absolute, relative they were. Indeed, you studied in science this relativity theory. Indeed, two perfect accurate clocks will not continue to show the same time if they were to gather again after a journey if one of them has been moving very fast relative to the other. From this movement, it follows that the world's most famous formula, which describes the relationship between mass and energy. This mass and energy we have studied in 9th standard also, and this E is equal to mc square was a formula propounded by the mathematician. So in this mathematical equations, E stands for energy, M is for mass, and C is for the speed of the light in a vacuum, about 300,000 kilometers per second. So that formula is E mc square. While Einstein was solving the most difficult problems in physics, his private life is unraveling. Unraveling means starting to fail. He couldn't maintain because he was a scientist, and maybe he could not allot the time for family life. Albert had wanted to marry Mileva right after finishing his studies, but his mother was against it. She thought Mileva, who was 3 years older than her son, was too old for him. The only problem with the mother was that her to be the daughter-in-law would be 3 years elder than my son. That is unacceptable to me, because that means that he is too old, she is too old for my son, she thought. So she was also bothered by Mileva's intelligence. She is a book like you, his mother said. Einstein put the betting off. If the mother was not accepting her, then I cannot bring her to my house, because my mother is the person who will be dealing all the time. If she is not agreeing with what type of mentality or her daughter-in-law should have, then I cannot help it out. And he put off the wedding. The pair finally married in January 1903. This was put off, it was not cancelled. Okay, so in 1903, and had 2 sons, but a few years later the marriage faltered. How it happens in foreign, you see, in America and in European countries. 2 sons, and the faltering means it failed. Mileva, meanwhile, was losing her intellectual ambition and became an unhappy housewife. And she was also feeling suffocated or stifled, because she is an intellectual person, and if she is made to sit in the house, taking care of the children, then that was frustrating for her. After years of constant fighting, the couple finally divorced in 1919. Einstein married his cousin Elsa the same year. So after giving divorce to Lena Anchi, Mileva Anchi, he does a next marriage the same year with cousin Elsa. Then in the 12th para, Einstein new personal chapter coincided with his rise to world fame. In 1915, he had published his general theory of relativity, which proved to a new interpretation of gravity. This particular theory which he propounded had a big impact. An eclipse of the sun in 1919 proved that it was accurate. And the eclipse proved that what theory of relativity he had predicted, that was taken or put into test, and that was accurate at that time. Einstein had correctly calculated in advance the extent of which the light at fixed stars would be deflected through the sun's gravitational field. Absolutely pinpoint, and that relativity theory is so important today even, that we are able to get the exact timing of eclipse happening, or the rotation of sun in seconds, then even rotation of the celestial bodies which are very far away. Then we have Halley's comet, 27 years that takes for one to be seen from Earth. All these so pinpoint the prediction that can be made because of this great mathematician, and today we are so accurate for this reason. The newspaper proclaimed his work as a scientific revolution. Kranti, this particular scientific revolution. Einstein received the Nobel Prize. Obviously, he should get a Nobel Prize for science and physics, particularly. In 1921, he was showered with honors and invitations from all over the world, and lauded the press. And the press lauded by the press means praised. He was such a great person. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, Einstein migrated to the United States. 5 years later, the discovery of nuclear fission in Berlin had American physicists in an uproar. Many of them had fled from fascism, just as Einstein had. So Germany had to, because the fascism was one of the fastest type of mentality, or the theory of administration was very difficult for commoners, and therefore just as Einstein had, and now they were afraid of Nazis could build and use an atomic bomb. So fear of this atomic bomb was there at the time in Germany, and therefore the fascists were, were a great threat at that time, and therefore it was decided that many of the Germans fled away from the country. At the urging of the colleague, urging means insisting, you come. Einstein wrote a letter to American President Franklin D. Roosevelt on 2nd August 1939, in which he warned a single bomb of this type exploded in a pot might very well destroy the whole pot together with some of the surrounding territory. So that power of this nuclear bomb will have atomic bomb, and therefore his words did not fail to have an effect. The Americans developed the atomic bomb in a secret project of their own and dropped it on the Japanese cities in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. So already we know about this, Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing by the Americans, and Einstein, way before he had told that and written to the president that this atomic bombs are a very, create a human disaster, and that we saw how people of Nagasaki and this Hiroshima suffered. Even today they do, because of the atomic reaction and radiation that takes place in that have been, penetrated the soil. So people have this effect, genetically also it was, and many people lost their lives. So both the cities were totally, completely decimated. Decimated means, just reduced to rubble. So that the effect, and Einstein had said, because he was a scientist, he knew propulsion of energy that this atomic bomb will generate, and it will, multiply the effect would, and such a small bomb will have such a multiple effect that it will, devastate a whole big region apart from where it has fallen. That videos also you must have seen of the bombing, how the propulsion of this energy pushing forward and destroying what comes in the way, that was, viewed by the whole world. Einstein was deeply shaken by the extent of the destruction. This time he wrote to the public missive in the United Nations. He wrote in the United Nations, he wrote, not to the United States president, because they were not listening. They are preparing secretive ways of developing this bomb. In it, he proposed the formation of the world government. See, he was a revolutionary thinker also. Unlike the letter to Roosevelt, this one made no impact. So here also no one listened to him. But over the next decade, Einstein got ever more involved in politics, agitating for an end of arms building and using his popularity to campaign for peace and democracy. So he himself, involved himself in this, the next decade, to building up a type of, own opinion and, campaigning and for the peace and democracy. He wanted to stop the world making this destructive arms and collecting them in their warehouses. When Einstein died in 1955 at the age of 76, he was celebrated as a visionary and the world citizen as much as a scientific genius. So he was a genius, and they lost him at the age of 76. He lived, and that was a great loss for the world. He was a scientific genius. So that way we see that the life of Einstein we have seen, wherein he his inventions were revolutionary, and how his life and personal life, how he was able to manage, and with his mother also, how he adjusted and delayed the marriage, and she, all these things, the personal as well as the scientific inventions that he did was nicely portrayed over here. So with this we complete our students complete our lessons and lesson over here, and therefore you will have to write the textual exercise which is given at the end of the lesson in Fairwood. With this we complete the lesson and see you in the next lecture.